All right, well, we're going to get this party started here today. Welcome to everybody that is back for our Wednesday webinar sessions. And we had today was supposed to be a virtual evidence room tour. And I had a couple of people lined up, and for multiple reasons, it simply didn't pan out today to do a virtual evidence room tour. But we weren't going to cancel. We are simply going to shift to another topic that I was prepared to talk about. I didn't know it was going to be today, but here we are, and we are going to talk about it today. And so today's focus is evaluating evidence management software. What are the things that are important, and how can I go about getting you in a position, for those of you that don't have an evidence management system, for those of you that may be using an RMS, and I think there's even applicable, what we're going to discuss today, I think it's applicable no matter what you're reviewing. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that I think are important when it comes to evaluating any software, but we're going to focus on evidence management software today. Now, for those of you that are tracker clients or use our software, don't run off because I want your input as we go along. I'm going to show you something that I'm going to guess you didn't have access to when you were evaluating software. And I'm looking for your feedback, because what I'm going to present today is not the gospel by Ben Townsend as far as I'm saying this is exactly what you have to evaluate. This document that I'm going to show and share to everybody is a living, breathing document. So for those of you that are already using our software, I'm hoping you'll give me some feedback as we get to the back end of this thing. And for those of you that are not using an evidence management system, or you're in an RMS product, and you know, odds are at some point you're going to be looking for something, I hope you look back on this and say, that was very valuable as far as helping me get into a better position of evaluating these systems. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to show off my screen here. Hold on one second, I need to flip some things around here for just a moment. All right, so can I get from somebody on my end, can I get a confirmation from somebody that you are seeing an Excel document on my screen? So in the question and answer window, in fact, I should say that as we get into this, we're still going to use the question and answer window. Thank you. I do have multiple people saying that they're seeing it, so that is fantastic. All right, and so again, as we're going along, please use the question and answer window so that if you have questions about what we're going over, I will frequently stop and take a breath and ask, is there anything that we just covered that you do want to elaborate on? So what I'm showing here is an Excel document. And the reason it's an Excel document is because I want you to modify this thing. Again, as I mentioned a moment ago, this is not the gospel according to Ben Townsend. This is just what I think is a really, really good start. Because in the end, when it comes down to evaluating evidence management systems and what is the best one, it's not per se what's the best system out there, because there's so many differences in the system. What it really boils down to is, based on what are your requirements, which system best meets the needs. That's what we're shooting for. Your needs plus what do all of these systems provide, and which one gets you the closest to being exactly what you need. And so I'm going to give you this Excel document, and you can manipulate it and modify it and add to it. But let me explain really quickly what you're looking at here outside of just an Excel document. Number one, I've got it broken down into sections. I'm going to talk for a moment about architecture of the system you're looking at. We're going to talk about dashboards and statistics and graphs. We're going to get into searching and extracting data. These are all what I believe are major necessities to any evidence management system, regardless what you go with. And I would be perfectly fine at the end of this if you said, you know what, listen, I don't care about digital evidence. I got another product for that. I'm not even going to consider that whole section. No problem. Just take it out. That's not part of what your core needs are. Then we get into doing transactions, customization, reporting, tasking, major features to an application, and then we get down to the very bottom, miscellaneous features. Now, here's what is important about what I've got set up right here. You'll notice down at the very bottom, every one of these rows is a different feature or something that if I were you, I would discuss with whatever evidence management system you're looking at. But each one of them has been weighted as a 1, 2, or a 3. 1 being, I think it's the least important because I want it to, it's got less weight to it. 3 being, I believe that is absolutely something critical that you should be looking for. And so I'm going to weigh it a little more heavily. But you'll notice in my document, every one of these equals up to a score of 100. And I sort of did that exactly so that in the end, if you were to take this document, let's just pretend that you're looking at 3 different software vendors for evidence management systems. You should almost be able to send this exact Excel doc to them and say, I would like you to answer, does your software have this? You know, to what degree would you need to build it out to get it there? Or simply tell me what your answer is to each one of these components. And in the end, that should almost allow you to sit down and get 3 scores for 3 systems based on your requirements, so that in the end, you can come back and say, ah, that one right there easily got us closest to what our requirements were. Now, again, there are things in here that might be missing. You might suggest that, hey, pricing is a core component to what I'm interested in. Now, from my standpoint, I don't think pricing should be on a list like this. I think it's something that does go into the evaluation, so that in the end, if you're looking at 2 products that are both a 95 out of 100, you might say, well, I'm going to go with the more affordable one because it's got all of the features and comparisons. But in the end, I have no problems whatsoever with you saying, I'm going to pick the most affordable application that is out there, as long as you can understand this is what I'm not getting. There is no problems with saying that one right there is $1,000 or $3,000 or $5,000. I want that one, it's in my budget, and I'm willing to give up all these other things. That's where I think people really many times don't understand what they're getting into, and they just look at price and then they say, oh, hey, that's the cheapest one, I'm going to go with it. So now that you understand how this document is laid out, let me take a moment and explain some of these different areas. And then in the end, again, I would like to get some feedback from you guys to say, hey, here's a component you've missed out on. Here's something I think that's important. I may add it to this document, but more likely in the end, you'll just simply manipulate this document to be whatever it is that are your needs. Okay. So, all right. Hold on one second. Let me turn off. Some people are saying that my background is distracting, so let me turn that off. Sorry about that. I've got multiple people popping on here saying that the background is distracting, so I'm going to do that. All right, so now the background is off, and I think we're back to rolling here. So let's go through, I'm going to take just a few brief moments. This is not going to be an exhaustive explanation of every one of these components. What I want you to be able to do is step away from it and say, in general, I understand what you're saying. All right. Okay, one second, I'm gonna turn that off. All right, so here we go. The first section is the architecture of the software. This is the one area many people don't even dig into because they're looking for features of the software. Does it do this? Does it do that? And they don't even consider the actual architecture of the product. So the first thing I have on here, is this a browser-based system? Is it in the second line item? Is it cloud? Am I installing it on my end? Where is this software going to reside? And the one caution I would give to you that I think is important about that is generally the closer the product is to a cloud-based application, the closer it is to a browser-based application, the odds are the newer the architecture. There are a lot of products out there on the market where you're going to install it on your desktop and it's 20 years old. It's the same product they installed or they sold and installed back in the year 2000. And in technology terms, something that was developed in 2000 is like a 100-year-old person. I mean, it's archaic, and there's nothing wrong if you say, I'll take that, I want that. But just keep in mind, if you buy that 20-year-old system, the odds of it doing email alerts and notifying officers of evidence dispositions, that's probably not going to happen. So I would suggest you are looking something that is closer to a cloud-based, browser-based system. It doesn't have to be cloud-based. I'm fine with you installing it on your infrastructure, but something that's closer to that is important. I think you got to look at how old is this application? You know, when did you first start developing this stuff? Because that's going to tell you a lot about what you're going to get out of it. The next part on there that I think is really important is compliances. Is this product CJIS compliant? Does it meet any requirements for CJIS? Does the company you're talking with even know what CJIS is? And they should be able to answer that question. If they don't know what CJIS compliance is, then their product is probably a long way away from being CJIS compliant, okay? And I think another really important thing, and I'm gonna skip down to row 8 on my document, mobility. We live in a world of moving around. And so the question you've got to answer is to mobility and infrastructure these things are, does it matter whether or not my officers can collect evidence in the field and enter it onto a mobile device? I'm fine if you say that's something that I don't even care about. But as we are in a world of certainly far newer technology and being able to use a mobile device, my cell phone, does it matter that I can use this device to enter evidence? What if you're at a crime scene and you're entering evidence and taking pictures? You got to ask the vendor the question, what is your mobility platform? Is that something that I'm even able to use? Whether or not I know that that's something I need today, is it something that's necessary for tomorrow? Because one of the things we tell people that are looking at our application is, you could be in a McDonald's restaurant and looking up evidence. And is there a day and time you could even imagine a necessity of looking at evidence from your house? Voila, we're in COVID. People are working from home now. So that becomes a critical question. Are you able to access your evidence management software from your house? I guarantee you many of you 6 months ago would have never even thought about that as a necessity. And here we are today, and you're sitting in your house trying to work at least a couple of days of the week. How's that working out? So again, you may say, don't care about mobility. I'm fine. You can delete that off the document, but at least you know that is something to talk about. Okay. Let's go down into the next section and talk about dashboards and graphs and statistics, all right? Let me see here. Dashboard and graphs and statistics. A lot of people look at evidence management software from a standpoint of officers entering evidence, and I'm going to print out reporting. To me, one of the most important things that are in an evidence management system is your ability to get statistics and data brought back to you. If I were to walk into your evidence room tomorrow, and I know I'm not going to do this, but if I walked in tomorrow and I asked you 100 questions about your evidence, for example, how much evidence have you brought in the last year? How much of it has been disposed of? How much of it have you returned to owner? Can you give me a list of all the evidence that's been returned to the owner? Can you give me the value of all your currency and all your drugs and everything else? To me, if you cannot answer those questions, and if you can't do it within a reasonable amount of time, because some of you would say, I can get those answers, I just need a month to get them together. If you cannot reasonably answer those questions about data statistics within your evidence management application, odds are you don't even know what's on your shelves. And I might suggest to you, if you don't know what you got and you cannot get statistics like that, how are you going to be effective at disposition? Because to me, the most critical component of disposition is knowing what you got, when can it be disposed of, and what is the process with which I'm going to go through disposition. And it all starts with, what do I got right now that is even eligible for disposition? And if you can't get that answer within moments, you're going to be really behind the 8 ball when it comes to actually disposing of evidence. In fact, I might even suggest to you, and I might be pointing out some people, if your disposition process stinks and you're not getting rid of evidence, odds are you have no idea the quantities of the stuff that's sitting on all your shelves. And so that's why that is, to me, it is a really important topic of statistics and reporting and manipulate. In fact, I would suggest to you, you should be able to have 100 data points at your fingertips at a moment's notice. So yes, I've got 100 questions I'm going to ask you about evidence. Maybe you got to build the statistics out to get it. But if I come back tomorrow and ask the same 100 questions, it's going to take you a matter of a couple of minutes to get those answers. All right. So now we move on to the next part, which is searching and data extraction. All right. So now I'm talking about, I've got the answers. I can see that the answer is I've got 300 items that meet that criteria that I'm looking for. How am I going to use that information now? So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to select all these items. I may kick it out to an Excel document. I may want to email it to somebody else and say, hey, you were asking me about all of this evidence. Here's an Excel document showing you all 300 items that meet that criteria. Okay, and so now, and I've got listed on my document the ability to create unlimited custom queries. And I think I'm going to get to it in a little bit, but one of the most important questions you can ask a vendor when you're looking at their evidence management application is, how much can I do versus how much do I need you to get it done? And you obviously want the answer to be, I don't need to go to the vendor to get that thing done. And so now I go back to my question a moment ago. I got 100 questions I want to ask. Do I have to go to the vendor to get them to build out the queries to get those answers? Or can I literally go into the application? Today, a new question was brought up. I'm going to go get the answer. Now I'm moving on. I've got that data. I'm telling you right now, and you know this to be true, the more people you have to get involved in the process of quartering all your data and figuring out what it is, the slower it becomes and the more costly it is. These answers have got to come very, very quickly. I need this stuff right now because, again, the data that you need is always the most relevant at the exact moment you need it. The further you have to wait from the moment you need it to get it, the more irrelevant the data becomes. Okay. All right. So moving on to the next one. This is another critical component for the world we live in today, physical and digital evidence. Your worlds are no longer just physical evidence. It is now managing all of these digital components that go along with it. So some of the questions that I would ask is, does your application allow physical and digital evidence to be managed within the same software product? Does the software handle chain of custody? In fact, I've got it written on row 29. Do you offer a digital chain of custody? Yes, it's an Excel file, but do you offer the ability that every time somebody downloads that file, I can tell who downloaded it, when they downloaded it? And again, most of you would not even think to ask that question, digital chain of custody. That is a line item on here that you want the vendor to answer the question, do I have digital chain of custody? Okay. Now, I also think that it's a major important piece that you can access both of those from within the same interface. And this is where it may get to where you're like, I don't need one that does that. But in the end, if you've got one system to manage all your physical evidence and you have another system to manage all your digital, that means you've got user admin differences between the two. Every time you want to look at one or the other, you got to bounce in and out of the other system. And here's where I think that's important. When it comes to disposition of evidence, it's no longer just disposition of physical evidence, it is disposition of digital evidence. So I want it to where when an officer goes in and reviews a case, they're not only looking at a list of all their physical evidence and saying, yeah, keep this, get rid of that, but they're also looking at the digital evidence and saying, I don't need that stuff anymore also. Because again, digital evidence piling up on a computer hard drive eventually will lead you to the same problem you have in the evidence room. I'm out of room. And so I want disposition going on both of those. And that to me is where I think it's important that physical and digital are in the same system. But I think I weigh that a little bit less on here. Okay. All right. Now the next one, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. And you know what? I probably should breathe. I'm not seeing any questions come in. I'm hoping people are trekking along, generally with what I'm saying here. And maybe the questions will come in a little bit more at the end when I ask for what are we missing. All right, so we'll keep moving. If you got questions, throw them out. All right, the next one, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I believe every software product out there is going to do transactions, check in, check out, moves, dispositions. Now, I'm telling you, there's a lot of products out there, and this is notable in the RMS evidence world, all right, when you're using the plug in your RMS system. I've heard people say, in order to check out 100 items, I have to go through 100 individual items and do a transaction on that. I mean, how awful would that be? I mean, how much time would it take to sit there and go through 100 items and check them all out? You should be able to go in and use a barcode scanner or in my world, a mobile device to check out 100 items, and it should be done very quickly, and you should get digital signatures on them. That should be something everybody does, but I'm telling you, those are things you got to dig into because there are varying degrees with which everybody does that. Now, I do have one down here, row 34, unalterable chain of custody. You would think that doesn't need to be said, but I'm telling you, it needs to be said. If your software allows you to manipulate chain of custody, my simple question is, how reliable is chain of custody? All right, so that is something that our software, we do not allow. We do not allow by design the ability to manipulate chain of custody. So we list it as unalterable chain of custody. All right, the next one I think is unbelievably important. It is a question you should ask your vendor. Can I build my own custom data collection fields? Again, just like a little bit ago, where I threw out the scenario, 100 different questions. Well, what happens when all of a sudden something new comes up in this world, and now all of a sudden your chief says, you know what, going forward, I want you to submit me an annual report that says how many pieces of evidence did you bring in that were potentially exposed to COVID-19? Now, I will admit that's an off-the-wall scenario. Most likely you're never going to deal with that. But let's just say your chief walked in tomorrow and told you in the evidence room, I need to know at the end of this year how much evidence was potentially exposed to COVID-19. And right now, your answer would probably be, I wouldn't even know how to do that. Do you want me to get a piece of paper out and write them all down? And so in that scenario right there, you need to be able to go in and add a data collection point to the item entry screen that says, maybe it's a radio button or a checkbox or a drop down that says, was this evidence exposed to COVID-19? And the question goes right back to what I said a little bit ago. Who's going to do that work? Do you got to get technical people involved? Do you have to get the vendor involved? And in the end, the more people are involved, the more expensive it becomes, the more slowly it goes. I want you to be able to go in and within a moment's notice, I'm going to create a new data collection field. And within a few moments of that, I want you to be able to run searches on that evidence. And to top it all off, I want you to be able to go into your item label and add that piece of data onto the item label. And I want you to be able to do all of that yourself. Now, you may say, hey, I can't do all of that. And so you may need some help doing it. But the important thing is you need to be able to do it. If you can't do it, you can't react to things that are going on in this world. You don't know what's in your evidence room. You are going to be really slow to respond to all of this stuff. And that's what we don't want. Okay, the next component in here is the reporting component. I've got listed on here report customization. Again, I would very simply ask the question, if I want to build my own report, my own nice PDF stylized report, and I want to put my logo on it, and I want to create a custom field where is the evidence COVID-19 related, and I want that report to be able to have that. The simple question again is, who's going to do all that work? And if it's the vendor, it's going to cost you money and time to get that done. You know, ask the question, how does report customization work? All right, now we're getting down a little closer to the bottom of the listing here. The next one is tasking and communicating with other people about evidence. And here's why I think that is important. It comes time to disposing of a piece of evidence. You've got something in your hand, you know it's eligible for disposition, and you want to get rid of it. Okay, and so for many of you in today's world, what that means is you're going to send an email to somebody, you're going to make a phone call, but the worst case scenario is you're going to print out a piece of paper and deliver it to them. And most likely in all three of those scenarios, you're going to get ignored. You'll know it down the road. You got to go back and do the same process again. I want a tasking communication component to the software where it essentially works like email. You go in and you create a task, you create a to-do for somebody, and you say, hey, I want to get rid of this evidence. Are you cool with that? And now they're going to get an email saying they've been assigned a task. They can't ignore it, because if they ignore it, you're going to bump it up to their commander. And so, and obviously you got to get some agency input on that and get them to back you up on all of that. But with a task, they can't ignore it. And you know you sent it. It's in your list of tasks, and it doesn't get closed out until they respond to it. And the most important piece of that is 5 years from now, when you've already disposed of the evidence, and now all of a sudden it looks like that piece of evidence is turned up missing. Have you ever gone back to look for that piece of paper? Have you ever gone back to look for an email from 5 years ago? How much do you want to rely on that paper to back you up on getting rid of that disposition? Because I guarantee you, we've all got stories of that thing was lost and I don't have a record of it. With tasking, it's always in the software. It cannot be altered. It cannot be deleted. And now you've got record that not only did I ask you to dispose of that evidence, but here was your response on this date, this time, here it is. All right, now I've got a section listed on here. Let me see here. Hey, Max, can you hop on here? I know Max is running Organizer. I'm having a hard time doing all of this and the questions. Can I get you to look at the questions, and if there's relevance in there, can I get you to hop on here and read them?
Absolutely. I'll need to be an organizer, though, if you can make me an
organizer.
You
are already an organizer, so you should have the chat window over on the right. You just got to expand it out.
Gotcha. Okay, no questions as of yet.
Max work on that. I know there are some questions coming in, but I'll let him review those, and then he'll come on in just a moment. Okay, we've got 4 more sections to cover, and we'll have this all wrapped up in 10 minutes. The next one is what I've got listed as major features, okay? These are big things that it's going to be hard to put down a list of requirements for these things. You want to talk to that vendor about how they handle these. The first one is disposition notification, what I call auto dispo. Essentially, in the end, I would ask this question: how are you going to help me ramp up my disposition of evidence? That's it. Just ask that question. How are you as a vendor or a software product going to help me ramp up my disposition process? And now you need to evaluate what those answers look like. It's going to be either I can't help you with that, or you can print out pieces of paper that you can distribute to the officers. And that is an answer. What I would say is that's a really slow answer, and it's fraught with problems. I want a system that's going to automatically send out an email notification to somebody saying this evidence is up for review. What do you want to do with it? And again, you may hear that and say, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not ready to go that heavy yet. And I'm fine with that if you say I'm not ready to go that heavy. But what I am telling you with our software product, and when our clients implement that, it is the single greatest feature they can implement within, I think, any product. Because in the end, most people would say my biggest problem is disposition. So if we can ramp up the disposition process, that is going to be what I, again, call a major feature. The next one I'm going to list is workflow with email or SMS notification. So I would simply ask the question: if somebody were to log in and manipulate currency, can my finance person get a text message? You know, you may not care about that specifically, but in the end, if somebody were to say, oh yeah, hey, our software does that, you just go in, flip a couple of buttons, you put in the phone number of the person getting that, again, it speaks more to the development level of the product than it actually does to the feature. And so that's why I think that's important. And then the very last one, and we sort of elaborated on this a little bit ago, was the mobile device. You absolutely, again, to me, you should be looking at software that's going to operate on a mobile device, whether you want to use that mobile device or not. Because again, it doesn't matter so much that it's mobile. It speaks to the complexity and the level of development of the software. I think that's why that's important. So maybe you don't care about a mobile device, but you certainly want to talk about mobility and get some insight as to how much they're thinking about mobility, because it speaks to the technical ability of the software. All right, Max, you got anything to throw out?
Yeah, yes, sir. There's two questions on chain of custody. The first one, how do you correct an error made data entering in chain of custody if, say, the wrong badge number or there's a typo? How do you make that correction?
Yeah, so that's where you can go in and you would apply notes to it. And I would certainly understand in that scenario that you do need to make a note. But see, what I don't want to do is allow a manipulation of that data, because then all of a sudden I don't have the original stuff in there. So certainly within our application, there's ability to go in and make notes and do stuff like that. But the actual chain of custody itself cannot be manipulated.
All right, fantastic. And that I think answered the second question on chain of custody. Another one just came in. Are auto disposition function options customizable to meet statute of limitation variables that have now become matrices?
So let me speak broadly, so I'm not talking about just our application, but that is absolutely something that should be put in there. Is that and my answer is to that, yes. You should be able to go in, and when you turn on those auto disposition notifications, those notifications are going to be based on, it's going to be a different time length if it's a murder investigation versus found property. On found property, that notification is going to go out at 90 days versus, a murder, it may be multiple years down the road, before even a summary notification goes out. So the answer to that is I would absolutely anybody that has auto disposition features like what I'm describing is probably going to have it to where you can manipulate the levels of which the notifications go out. My biggest worry is, does it exist at all? Like, do you even have the ability to notify people when evidence is up for review? That's what I'm far more concerned about.
Fantastic. And we had a follow up on chain of custody. Is the error correction note visible with exportable chain of custody records?
Yeah, well, here's what, again, speaking broadly, what I would say is that's something you should definitely ask them is, how do I handle that? In fact, I think I have, I don't know if I even have logging in here, but most applications are going to have it to where if you go in and manipulate data, even data that you're like, for example, currency, somebody entered $1,000 in currency, they accidentally put one too many zeros on it, it was $100 in currency. Now that's a sticky situation right there, right off the bat, because I'm going to tell you right now, if it's guns, drugs, or money, as an evidence custodian, you should not be manipulating that stuff. That's where it goes back to the officer. They manipulate it, and now the logging record indicates the date and time they manipulated it. And so I think any good application, in fact, this is another sort of, broad subject here, but I would argue officers should be entering their own evidence into your evidence management application. If you happen to be operating where they write out paper and turn it into you in the evidence room, and then you hand bang all that evidence into the software, I'm going to assume you're spending the bulk of your day simply inputting evidence into the system, and you don't have time for disposition. In fact, I don't think it would be a large stretch for me to suggest if you're doing that, what I just described right there, you are barely doing disposition. And I don't think that's a guess. I'm just saying you're spending the bulk of your day entering evidence. And so I think any application you look at, it should include officers enter their own evidence. They can go in and manipulate stuff that's not checked in. And if they do manipulate something, maybe I've kicked it back to them, there's going to be a logging record that indicates what it was before and what it is now. But that's why it's so critical that their name be on that, not your name.
Fantastic. Okay. That's all the questions for now.
Okay. So I'm going to skip a couple of sections here just because we're running out of time, and I really want to focus on some of these miscellaneous features down here at the bottom, because there's a couple of them in here that you would have no idea to ask, and they are some of the most important questions you can ask. And I'm going to start with row 70 first. People do not even think about asking about modules. There is nothing more infuriating in this world when it comes to software than to do a demo of the application. They show you every feature that they offer. And then I've heard stories where people bought that software and all of a sudden they found out they bought the base application and they didn't get those modules. They became extra money. I'm not even joking. I've heard people say they had to go back to their chief and explain that that $30,000 investment they made was $50,000 short of the full product. And I'm telling you what, you want to have egg on your face and you want to look really bad, you go back to your chief and explain to him that you didn't understand that that vendor sold modules to their product. Modules are infuriating. They are difficult to figure out. I know that there are people out there that their pricing sheets are 5 pages long. If you need 5 pages to explain how you price it, you need a doctorate to figure out how that works. And so what I'm saying in the end is if their pricing document is 5 pages long or 3, or they've got modules for this or modules for that, the possibilities of you figuring out what that application is going to cost you now and in 5 years is going to be very, very difficult to figure out. And so it's no problem if you buy an application that has modules, but you got to know what you're getting into. You better understand all the different pricing components. You better understand that that module is this amount of money. And oh, by the way, it's not just a module, it's the number of people logging in. Man, it should not be that difficult to figure out. So if you're in a phone call with a vendor and you're struggling to figure out how they price the software, that's a red flag right off the bat. So I simply have down there, do you sell modules? That's a question I want to ask. How do you price your software? And they better be able to be very elaborate and very quick with how they price their stuff out. Okay? You want to ask the questions, line 67. How am I going to get all my legacy data into this product? Who's going to do all of that work? What does it look like? And so, within ours, we want to discuss what does the data import process look like and how much help am I going to get? All right, here's another one. I don't know that I have support down here. I think one of the most important things you can ask somebody is, what does your support look like? In fact, test the support of that vendor. I'm telling you right now, before you buy the software product, call their technical support phone number. If they've got a chat system, get on their chat system. If they've got an email system, email that vendor and find out how long does it take them to respond to your request. Okay, because if they suck at responding to that while you're in the buying phase, what do you think it's going to look like when you're a paid customer and now you're not giving them per se all the upfront money? That support infrastructure is one of the most overlooked, but one of the most important things, because long term, that's what you're going to be dealing with. All right. Another one that I have on here. When's the last time they or you updated your software? Do you have a living, breathing product that's getting updates, Or has it been 5 years since you've updated your application? A lot of you, right now, my assumption is you're running a product that's on your infrastructure and it has not been updated within a month of Sundays. And updating it becomes a disaster. Or you got to pay for it or buy a new product or whatever else. Those are questions you want to be asking. All right. I would get into inventory and discrepancy reports. We call it now, I don't call it an audit report, but you need to know, how does the inventory module work within that software? You know, and I'm talking about going in and scanning all the barcodes on all the items and producing a report that tells you the discrepancies. You got to understand how that works within the system. Okay. I've got on here row 65. Again, I've got some really low importance to these ones because I wouldn't say these are as important as some of the higher, you know, some of the features of the system, but they are questions you want to ask. Do you integrate with my RMS system? Is that something we can even talk about? You know, have you integrated with an RMS system? How much is it going to cost me to get that done if I want to do that thing? Rows 72 and 73, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here. Training and continued education. When is the last time for some of you, you actually went to a training on your software product? When's the last time your vendor held a training in your area where other users of the system, you know, collectively met and, you know, learned together? Is that something that even happens? Ask your vendor, do you guys even do something like that? Buying a software product and then just throwing it in place is not going to fix your problems. And let me say that again one more time. Software will not fix your problems. Software is one component to a larger, a larger process. And training, continued education. How are you guys going to help me advance in what I'm doing? And if they don't have a good answer to that, that should be a red flag to you. Or at least it should be a flag you're aware of that even exists. All right, the last one I would throw out. How many implementations of your software have you done? You know, is this your first rodeo, or have you been doing this for a while? You know, those are questions you want to ask. And probably for many of you, you're going to go out and find somebody else using the software and talk to them. But in the end, the answer to a software product is not, it's awesome, I love it, it's great. A product should be based on all these evaluations, all of these characteristics that I've displayed today. And in the end, like I said earlier, I have no problems if you say, I want the most affordable product, I don't need that feature. I'm perfectly fine with that. You're at least educated on what you're not going to get, or that you have given it up. You're not doing it because you didn't know. All right, I have exhaustively covered this. I am going to post this document in the Facebook group like we post everything else. If you are not in the Facebook group, I am going to put in the chat window my email address, and I am more than happy to email this document to anybody. If you cannot get it from the Facebook group, there is my email. All right, Max, let me give you a moment for some questions. I see some more stuff pouring in. You got anything for me?
Yeah, a couple more came in. First one, how is data merging handled? Frontline officers are very vocal or resistant if they have to describe evidence in RMS and then again in evidence management programs.
And listen, that's a great question. And this is where I'm going to have to get into my opinion on that matter. What I would say about that, for the bulk of our customers, they are using our standalone evidence management system. It is not integrated with their RMS product. So their agency has simply taken the stance, if you need evidence, it's over there in that application. There are some organizations we work with that we've done integrations with their RMS system so that it's single entry. I completely agree with not having dual entry, and you may have a little bit of work to do to get your agency to buy into the idea. We're not going to do dual entry. We're going to use that system over there. That's evidence. That's where it's at. So that's my answer to the question, but anybody could easily argue in a different direction on that.
All right, thank you. And one more. Says this may be a little off topic, I think, but our IT wizard was asking if storage of data for our agency could it be stored exclusively at our agency, or is it all in the cloud, or is it stored in both locations?
Well, here's what I would say. For the purposes of what I'm doing here today, that's a question you absolutely should ask them. I think that when I have a line item for that up here under physical and digital, I put on here row 30, digital media on-premise file server. You know, so we, speaking of us specifically, we have a cloud-based application, but we have two components. You can store the media in the cloud, or you can store it locally on your own infrastructure and still use our cloud component. So that's my answer to that. You know, for the purposes of what we're trying to accomplish today, I think that's a question you should ask the vendor. Absolutely.
Excellent. And I think that was the last one.
One other document I'm going to throw up on the Facebook page. I just saw somebody posted on there about one of the age-old fights when it comes to doing systems and buying systems is just use the RMS application. Like for purely for monetary purposes, many agencies will say, I'm not going to go with a standalone application. We are going to go with whatever the RMS system offers. I have two answers to that. Number one, make your RMS vendor answer all these questions. And we've talked about this in other of our webinars where if you go back to the chief and your answer to, I don't want to use the RMS system, I want to use this because the RMS sucks. If that is your answer, you might as well pick it up, walk it out the door. Your chief does not care that you think it sucks, all right? You've got to have a better answer than that. So I would simply say, take this comparison document, go to the RMS vendor and say, can you please answer all these questions? And then when you sit down with the chief, you say, hey, I did an evaluation between the two. And hey, chief, I got no problems with you saying, I'm going to go with the more affordable one, but I just need to make sure you're aware that the RMS vendor scored 28 out of a 100, whereas the application I'm looking at was 98 out of 100. So chief, just could you sign the document saying I'll take the liability of that difference right there and we'll go with the cheaper one. Maybe don't go that harsh with will you accept the liability, but educate them on what's going on. Make sure, and this video I'm doing here today is going to be presented. We're going to put it out there on YouTube. So, you know, if they'll sit down and watch it, yeah, watch this video. In the end, your ability to sit down and explain to them correctly with data what the better option is, you are far more likely to get a better answer than just going in with it sucks. Because I don't know any world, anywhere, that's just like your kids coming to you and just like, I don't want to do that because I just don't want to. You know, what kind of answer is that? I got to have something more valid than that. All righty. Guys, I think we have exhaustively covered this. I appreciate everybody's time and attention. I would say, you know what, I guess the one thing I didn't get into that if anybody wants to hang out and answer, if there's anything that is missing out of this, and I'll post the document, if you've got comments on it, I'd love to know, hey man, you missed out on this. We really need to add that. Maybe people would benefit from it being in the larger document. But again, the reason this is Excel is because you can manipulate this thing to whatever your needs are. That is the objective here, is that you are sitting down, you are coming up with your requirements, you are grading them. This is simply a tool to help make it easier for you to get that done. Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. I'll post these documents up on the Facebook page. If you don't have access to the Facebook page or you have no clue what I'm talking about, and many of you are already on there, in the chat window, I just put the link to the Facebook page. Go on there and request access to it, and then you'll have everything you need. All righty. Everybody, have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.